There is very rarely any good news coming out of China. They are our number one enemy on the world stage. They're challenging all of our interests. They basically own our economy. They own a number of our politicians. That's bad stuff. But occasionally on the cultural front, I think we could really learn a thing or two from them, especially in the way that they are taking the Nyang Pao out of their movies. No more Nyang Pao. What is a Nyang Pao? I don't really know, but from what I have learned on the internet, it is a girly man. No more girly men in Chinese movies. Here to help us make sense of all of this is Megan Basham, the Daily Wire entertainment reporter, movie critic, author of Beside Every Successful Man, and someone who is certainly not a Nyang Pao. She is a girl. She's not a man at all. Megan, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, no sissy girls here.
So Megan, this is one of those news stories that I think confuses people who are used to a traditional left-right divide. Because the right tends not to like communist China, the left tends to like communist China. But the left tends to like to promote sissy men or girly men or Nyang Pao, and the right tends to think that we ought to be like Gary Cooper. You know, we ought to go back to a time when men were men. And yet China is the one putting out this fairly conservative or traditional new cultural guideline for their movies. So how do we make sense of it?
Well, you know, it's kind of, you need to look at it in the full context of everything that China is doing culturally. So when you hear that the Chinese Regulation Board for Broadcasters has put out a ban on sissy men, your instinct is probably to think, oh, they're talking about gay men. They're talking about homosexuality. Well, that has actually been illegal on Chinese television since 2016. So this is something bigger. They're not just saying we're not just going to have homosexuality on television. We don't want anything that confuses gender. We don't want womanly, effeminate-looking men. You might think, for example, of the Cinderella movie that Amazon just premiered with Billy Porter in the role of a genderless fairy godmother. Well, that would be illegal now in China.
Well, do you know, this actually brings up, I think, an even more complicated aspect of the story, which is I didn't see the announcement about the new Cinderella movie with the transgender godmother. And I didn't see it. I had no idea why, but then I clicked on the Amazon Prime Video account. Amazon Prime Video blocked me on Twitter. Now,
I saw that.
Did you see that too? So it's not as though I were tweeting at them. I was not interacting with them at all. They went out of their way to block me. I like to think it means that they do not consider me a Nyang Pao. I'll flatter myself here. But it is very strange because we're looking now at a government-run censorship board in China. And so we say, well, that's very bad. We don't like that. But we have a sort of censorship system here in the United States. And we've complained about that in Hollywood for a long time. If you want a portrayal of patriotism, if you want a portrayal of traditional values, you're probably not going to find that in Hollywood. And maybe it's not run by the government, but it is run by the people who make the movies.
Well, and it's really interesting what's happening with China and this new ban, because it has complicated things for Hollywood. As you said, they like to make a big show of their representation and their inclusivity, but they tend to do it for these big international movies, your Marvels, your Star Wars. They will kind of throw themselves a parade for their exclusively gay moments, but they're so small and they're so in the background and their characters, you're like, I don't even know who that is. And then they go overseas and they can easily cut those scenes, and they keep them very small so that China may be willing to overlook it. Because something else to know about this is that China is now the #1 movie market in the world. They passed us last year. So you have Hollywood going, gosh, we really want all that Chinese money, but we also want all the accolades over here in the US from GLAAD and other gay groups that they work very closely with. So it's really become a very sort of complicated and, for me, kind of an amusing situation to watch.
Well, it's funny you mention this, that when Hollywood puts its really progressive moments, they always seem to be kind of contained so that maybe you could edit them out. Because last year, a friend of mine said, Michael, you have to watch this new cartoon movie. I said, what? I'm an adult. I'm not going to watch. He said, you have to watch it. It's one of the best movies to come out in years. It's called The Mitchells versus the Machines. And it was this movie. It's a movie totally about family values, tradition, loving your community, fighting against the big tech oligarchs. I mean, Jack Dorsey is basically the villain in this movie, and a good suburban father is sort of the hero. And the movie is as conservative as anything I've ever seen, except there is one totally gratuitous woke moment at the very end during the credits. I mean, it's so, but I imagine they couldn't have made the movie without that. It wouldn't have gotten out of Hollywood. And yet, if a movie like that were to go to China, you could very easily edit it out. So what is this going to mean for the big tent poles, the Marvel movies, the movies where the woke focus is on if China says you're out of here?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of possibilities, and I'm not a prophet, so I can just give you sort of the lay of the land as I see it. And one of the things that you're going to see is you're seeing a lot of strife within some of these studios. You hear rumors that Marvel chief Kevin Feige has gone to war with some of the Disney chiefs because, for that reason, he's out there promising representation, and they're out there looking at the bottom line. So you're seeing a lot of internal strife. I think you're going to see a lot of uncomfortable, let me put it this way, opinion essays that are starting to run in a lot of the trade magazines. And I don't want to be explicit here on the Ben Shapiro show, but I mean, I have seen essays from gay activists complaining that, yes, you had a gay love scene, but you didn't show thrusting. That is an actual essay that ran. So I'm just telling you that ran. And so you're seeing
that's always my complaint. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I say you need more thrusting in your scenes. I'm
sorry to bring it up, but that was a very big, very real essay that ran dealing with, at that point they were talking about Rocket Man, the right. Elton John biopic. Yeah. So you're starting to see this really big clash of values. And when you look at what China is doing with the video game ban, I don't know if you've talked about this, but they're not allowing kids to play video games more than 3 hours a week. With this ban on, again, not just homosexuality, but effeminacy. They don't want girly, weak young men. You look at these two cultures and you go, which one's going to dominate on the world stage? It doesn't feel like it's going to be the one with the genderless fairy godmother.
Yeah. This is the issue. If the biggest cause that America can rally around is the number of thrusts that we can insert into gay movies, then I just think China invade us now. We're not going to put up a defense. This is so weak. And this also requires, I think, a little bit of historical perspective, because while the United States, we always love to talk about freedom in the abstract and you do whatever you want and that's the American way. Nothing more American than more thrusts in movies. That actually isn't the case. We had an industry code called the Hays Code for many years, and rather than stifle the creativity of the movies, you had the greatest movies ever made were made during this era. I think just one year, just 1939, sort of at the height of the Hays Code, you had Gone with the Wind, The Wizard of Oz, Stagecoach, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Wuthering Heights. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And now we produce a bunch of swill, basically, a bunch of weak movies that when you look at the Oscars, most people haven't even seen or heard of most of them. So what does this mean for Hollywood? I mean, is Hollywood going to learn any lessons about maybe the sorts of values people want to see in movies, or no? Or it seems to me that the movies are less and less relevant every year. Are they just going to persist in this?
Well, and that's an interesting question, because you look at it and you go, don't they like money? Don't they like having big box office returns? And they've been getting their money in large part overseas. So if that spigot turns off, are they going to have to actually start appealing to average American audiences? Because you do look at it and you go, so many of these studio chiefs, so many of these filmmakers, directors, producers, they seem to want the applause of their industry more than they want big hits. Mm-hmm. And it really doesn't make a lot of sense just from a dollars and cents point of view. But if you look at it from cultural cred, that they really like to have within their group. And that's a powerful force. And I think it's really hard to overcome it. But if China is no longer allowing American movies in, and they have really curtailed the number of US films they're letting in, that could reshuffle the deck in some ways. And you might start to see maybe some upstart, particularly production companies, entertainment companies, come in and offer some of the types of entertainment that families are dying for, and they are dying for it. I mean, it was really frustrating to me to see that Mitchells versus the Machines and get all the way through it.
Yeah.
And then in the credits, very last scene, she refers to a girlfriend.
Right.
And I'm sitting there with my 7-year-old going, this did not just happen.
Yeah, we made it through an hour and 29 minutes of this excellent movie, and then for no reason, you throw in this radical sort of partisan statement. I know it was the same. It was the same feeling that I had. And now it's the most scandalizing thing of all, I guess, is that the average American movie watcher seems to have more in common with the Chinese Communist Party in terms of what we want to see on screen than we do with the people running Hollywood.
I mean, that is bizarre, right? That tells you how strange these sort of little insular communities can become, that I'm like, you need to listen to the rest of the country a little bit. And here's the thing, though, I don't think that they don't know. I mean, come on, they know what movies earn big box office. They know that part of the reason that your superhero movies do so well isn't because people only like superhero movies. It's because they are designed for an international audience, and therefore they don't have a lot of the content. Not none, but again, it's usually very subtle. So they know that that will make a lot of money. And that's why parents go to it. That's why, because I can take my kid to see Thor. I can take my kid to see Captain America at this point still and not worry too much about what kind of content's going to be in it.
Wait, you're saying you didn't take your kid to see Moonlight or Call Me by Their Name or what? I mean, all these.
I didn't. You know, it was a tough call, but I went, she's a little young at 7, 11. I'm not going to do that.
And forget the kids for a second. I mean, just a lot of Americans generally wouldn't go see these movies. And so I suppose there's a little bit of hope here that of all places, the Chinese communists are going to be doing it. You know, we've only got about 30 seconds left, but I do have to ask for your thoughts on why now? Why is the Chinese Communist Party now pushing for these more relatively traditional values and more patriotic movies?
Well, that's kind of a scary question, isn't it? Because, yeah, why now? If, as you brought up, if China owns so much of our economy, if suddenly the world has become much more unstable and they are starting to dominate major industries like the entertainment industry and become the biggest box office in the world, well, gee, you know, maybe they're suddenly starting to think we need to have a populace that is ready to dominate the world stage if the U.S. is declining. That's
the scary thing, even beyond whatever movies you're going to see and whatever woke moments at the end of Mitchells versus the Machines. Who's the top dog? Who's calling the shots? Well, China seems to think it's no longer the United States. Megan, we got to leave it there. Thank you so much for being here. Get Megan's book, too, Beside Every Successful Man. And you can always read her stuff on the Daily Wire. As new, smaller, growing companies start to take on entertainment as well. Megan, thank you.
The battle for the culture is heating up. We here at the Daily Wire are making some big moves. So be sure to like, subscribe, ring that bell, because you're not going to want to miss a single moment.